Welcome to Skill-Based Art, a learning resource for art students and artist teachers. My name's Fiona Bilbrough and I'm going to be demonstrating a self-portrait for you today. This is a subject that's close to my heart. My teacher training involved lots of self-portraits, still life and cast painting. Self-portraits to me are the ultimate test of where somebody's ability lies. It also can show other people what my capabilities are. Portraits, they're not forgiving. Landscapes, you can move a tree to the left or right, leave one out if you like, no one's going to know. But because we all know what the human face looks like, these features in the centre are so crucial to get accurate. It doesn't really matter about the hair or the clothes, but these features here must be relevant to each other. By taking a really good academic, methodical approach, you can get an accurate rendition so long as you obey the rules about measuring, tone, composition, and hopefully we get a likeness. So today I'm going to be doing a portrait using the Zorn palette, which is the simplest palette we can use. Anders Zorn, a very famous portrait painter, he used this palette, and it's a palette that disables the muddying of colours. It's simplified to a point that you don't have to think so hard about the colours that are involved, and you can really concentrate on just the tones. The colours that I'm using, I have standard titanium white, yellow ochre, cad red and ivory black. These colours don't really vary very much. I do like the Winsor & Newton white. I've tried the Michael Harding yellow ochre and that's quite nice as well. Reds can vary depending on the opacity of them and how much slip I want from them. As for ivory black, it's just a standard black that I've always used. I don't always use black on its own. I could sometimes make up a black for other still lifes or landscapes using alizarin crimson and viridian. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to be using a standard ivory black. My medium that I'm using is white spirits with linseed oil, and I also add in a little bit of spike oil. The spike oil, although very expensive, is actually really nice to have in the studio. It does have a calming effect on the model, or myself in this case doing a self-portrait. But as I said, it is very expensive. It's been being sold as something to wash brushes in and to be used as a medium. However, washing a brush, you can almost feel the oil smell in the studio. So little bits I think are fine. Some people might find it too aggressive, too strong. I'm going to explain to you about my setup. I have a very specific setup here. Still life and portraiture, it's all about how you set up the lighting and making sure that it remains consistent from start to finish. This portrait today is what I call an alla prima portrait. It's going to be started and finished while the painting's wet. So alla prima means start to end in one session. Sometimes I would use a freezer out on the back veranda to put a portrait in if I'm expecting to have a second day on a portrait. Again, that's still trying to make the paint stay wet for as long as possible. This particular setup, you'll notice I've got a plumb line set up. I'm going to line myself up so that that plumb line comes down the side of my nostril, my right nostril. On the mirror, you can see the plumb line here. That's what I'm matching it up with. And I've also got a horizontal plumb line that's going to mark my forehead. This position here needs to be stable. I could line up myself with the vertical plumb line and I can still be looking left or right and still my eyes are lining up. But this can alter if I'm going up or down. If I get tired during the day, that line might start off up here, but as I shrink down with fatigue during the day, it might move. So the benefit that I have the guarantee I have that I'm going to get it right is to place 2 dots on my face and line those 2 dots up on the mirror in exactly the same corresponding positions. Might sound a bit silly, but I've found it works for me, and it certainly does help with students because they find that they can't always guarantee they're in the same position, even when their eyes are focused. I'll just demonstrate for you. You can see the two dots here, and the idea is that I stand on my observation point, which I have marked with a little stick, covered in tape. The benefit of that is I can feel that under my foot and I don't actually have to look down. So in terms of keeping that ergonomic value to the work, I'm just trying to set everything up so that it's within arm's reach. I don't have to look down and I don't have to go ferreting around in a box for a tube of paint. Those paints are out before I start. My medium, as I said, is on my palette really close. Having said that, I'll just explain, or you can see that I'm lining up the dots on my face. I have marked the mirror already. It did take quite a while, but so long as I line this one up with this, that one to this, and I can see the line in my, across, the line is still coming down through my cheek here. Seems like a lot of work, but definitely worth it. If I was to get some of the measuring wrong, or I get tired, something happens, the mirror's knocked, it's hard to set it up again. So these are kind of foolproof guarantees that I can get myself and the easel exactly as it should be, as I wanted it to be in the beginning. Having said that, let's make a start. All right, to start with, I'm going to get rid of the biggest difference, which is the white of the canvas. So I've just mixed up a bit of ultramarine blue with a bit of light red oxide just for my rub-in. And after I've done the rub-in, I'll then be going across to my Zorn palette for skin tones. But as I said, this is just the rub-in at the moment. I want to make sure that I get a stain on the canvas. I've got a bit of white spirits in the mix here now, so thinning down the paint. A bit more warmth in the middle, and a bit more of the ultramarine blue down the bottom where I might want things to be a bit cooler. So this is just the area that I'm working within. Obviously I'm going to fill up the back of the background later. If it just ends up being what I want to finish as a finished portrait, then I would go further into the background and come to get rid of all of that white. The white is a big distraction, so you really want to be rid of that white as much as possible. Making sure that this first layer is not too runny. Using a big brush. Small brushes take too long, and I'm a great believer that it's big brush for big area, small brush for small area. Now, I'm going to get into marking the top of my head and the bottom of my chin. That is, I'm too close. A little bit. I'm going to mark where I want the top of my head to be, out there. Now that's not including the hair on top of my head. If I include the hair, one of the things to get used to is looking at the original pair of calipers and not the reflection of the calipers. That can be quite difficult for some people. So that is the top. Okay. Now I'm going to mark a central line. I'm going to have more space on the right hand side, so I'll place that. Always run my marks past where I'm looking at The reason for that is I might lose those measurements, but I still have my source of the original lines. So we talked about that second plumb line, the horizontal one, is the height of my hairline. Now I have to mark the dots on my painting that I have marked on the mirror. Can be like watching grass grow sometimes. Pretty slow. X marks the spot. Now I know that around that area I have light. Can be tricky when you've got a reflection to confuse you. And that actually is about right. So I'm only measuring how far across from the plumb line. I'm putting my second marker. Now I have to measure down. Okay, so where they cross, that is my point of reference for my red dots. I can already tell the surrounding of that dot is light. I'm going to measure the position of the eyes. Now, at the height of that red dot, I'm measuring the width of my forehead, because that dot is my reference for the down as well as the horizontal. That's about right. So I'm just finding the width of my forehead at the height of where the red dot was. Making sure I get rid of any mark that's not relevant. Now I'm going to aim for the height of the nostrils as they appear on the plumb line. That's the height of the nostrils. These are just where I'm seeing positions of light and dark. I'm measuring from the top of my forehead to the shadow, which opens up and becomes light just around the nose area, around there. There's more light on this side. And the length of the shadow under my eye comes down there. So that shadow comes down there. I'm going to put the red dot on the painting here so that I actually can simulate what these marks represent. So I'm going to stare at the canvas where I'm putting my dot. I'm going to clean that off. I'm still staring where that dot went. So now I have that dot measured, marked. I can see that there's light surrounding it. I'm going to measure I'll swap calipers now. I have favourite pairs of calipers. So these ones are really good, but they only go to a certain width. They only open up to that point, which is a bit of a problem on bigger pieces, but they're quite accurate. Probably more accurate than these other ones, which are also a favourite of mine, but I can hold these to the side instead of on the vertical. Okay, I'm going to measure the width at the widest part of my head now, which, if we're not including the ears, which I'm not, I'm looking at just above my nostril is the widest point. I have to check that again, actually. I might go back out to the outside of the hair, familiarise myself with the top again. Yep. Again, this is just the initial markings. Not working the Zorn palette just yet. I'm just looking at what is the tonal map. Measuring always from that horizontal plumb line. Always lining the red dots up. Just measuring the top of my eyebrow from the horizontal line. Sometimes my arm gets fatigued. Got to try and take that measurement fairly quickly. And again, it's tricky with the mirror. About there. Measuring from the horizontal line on my forehead again to the bottom of my eye socket. It does get confusing though with reflections. Always put down more paint than you think you're going to need, because it's very hard to mark, to put a measurement or a mark into something that's really pale. Much easier to see a light put into a dark area. Having a bit of trouble today with my vision, not helping. I've just had to come out of denial for needing glasses, and it's not easy when you're doing reflection of yourself. It's easier doing another model. You'll also notice that I'm fairly close. My arm is measuring really close to the mirror. Oops. Again, it's about where those lines would intersect is the important bit. As I said, it's a tonal map, what we're aiming for here. Sometimes it's the last strokes on the early part of the rubbing that actually end up being left behind as part of the finished painting. They can be quite nice. The choice of brush is also quite important, that you're not wasting time, as I said, with a small brush trying to fill in a big area. Getting myself in line all the time is the key here too. Unfortunately though, it is like watching grass grow. For me, this is always the slowest part, and I think the next part, when I'm putting on more paint, is the more interesting, dynamic part. I have to give my shoulder a bit of a breather in a minute. Really don't like wearing glasses, as I said. Okay, very important to keep these lines visible throughout all of this mapping in stage. I'm just going to give my shoulder a little bit of a rest for a minute, and then we'll come back in another minute or two. I've just come back from a quick break, and I've cooled down this side of the face because this light is quite a cool light. The cooler it is, the more neutral it will become. I'm just about to put my other red dot back in again, As I said, I have to keep redoing the plumb lines, and I may need to redo the red dot, but it always has to go back in the same position. Holding the arm up that can get a bit tiring, which is why I need to have a few breaks. So there is where my red dot is. Now I'm just going to stare at the canvas, and I'm going to rub out where I'm staring, have the brush loaded. So I put that back in that same spot again, and I'm going to double check that I got it right. Yep, it's right in the height. Yep. I'm actually going to touch the mirror because I find the reflection is, with my eyesight changing, it's quite tricky to work off the calipers, not the, or the dividers, not the reflection of the dividers. I'm still looking at the widest point on the left. It's really tricky. I certainly feel for my pupils who say to me that they struggle with needing to wear glasses. It's just becoming apparent to me that I can now relate to what they're saying. And I know we're going in from that angle there. Of course, when you shut one eye, you can't, it's harder to measure that eye, but I am right eye dominant, so I can only measure the height, but I can only measure the height of my closed eye, but I can look at in the mirror where my eye would be when it was open, and if there's a bit of dust left on the mirror, I can actually measure to that bit of dust instead of finding something else. So looking there, I'll measure my eyebrow, at the top of my eyebrow, from the plumb line there. Measuring the width of my forehead at the height of the top of my eyebrow. Can't be. Could be. If my brush is laid on my palette in exactly the same spot each time, I shouldn't need to look down. It's another thing that I've tried to instill in my students in the past. A tissue is also really handy for taking excess paint off, maybe lightening a tone without shifting the drawing. That's correct. Mouth has to come back up again. Going down to a smaller brush now. Big brush could be a bit too clumsy for staining up more of the features in detail. Like I said, this is just a tonal map at this stage. Don't have too much paint on the brush. Always using flannelette sheet. One of my biggest gripes is when I see people arrive with towels or t-shirt material. It's just not good enough to lift the paint off. It might shift paint around, but you need to have something that's lifting paint off as well. Calm areas must be treated as calm areas. Noisy areas, like around the nostrils and the eyes, can stay with a bit more noise in brushstroke. Constantly checking back that my measurements earlier are just still correct. This is about where the ear is being covered with hair, and there's lights in that hair as well. So it's lightest. Still have to put that plumb line back in again later so as not to lose my measurements. I often work with music on as well, so this is quite unusual. I can hear myself breathing, which means I'm actually really concentrating. This is the area under my chin. The jawline is really important, and unfortunately, a lot of people leave the mouth till last, including me. And it's taken me all these years to actually realise those crucial landmark points tell the biggest story, the mouth, even though we don't want it. We feel like the eyes are more important. They're actually not. It's a bit warm, that colour. So I'm going to cool it down. Take a press. I don't want it to be too dark. Again, taking that press with the tissue is a really good way of not losing your drawing. Sometimes it can measure with a brush as well. It doesn't matter what the tool is. Again, shutting one eye and then trying to measure that eye that you've just shut is quite tricky. Sometimes you get the glare off the paint as well, which can be a bit confusing. If you do the brush stroke down, it doesn't glare. When you do it across, it does. And it depends on the position of the light, the spotlight. But it can be a little bit of a problem when you're trying to measure. I can't stress strongly enough how this measuring is so important. My training was with plaster casts, and I have my teacher John Balmain to thank for that. We all suffered in John's classes having to paint many a plaster cast, but I fully understand the benefit and why we had to do it. Plaster cast is not a moving target. I'm actually a moving target at the moment, so that getting into position is just so important. And a lot of people don't like painting plaster casts, but they really are the integrity of your training. This flannelette, you need to get the stuff from the op shops, like bed sheets or old pyjamas, and preferably the ones that have been washed 100 times through the machine, because if they're still brand new, they tend to contain a bit of the starch in them that doesn't allow the absorption of the paint. Again, that shininess of the paint is a bit of a problem, but you just have to deal with things like that, like holding an easel down in the weather when you're outside landscaping on a windy day. There's always physical things to deal with, and there's no point avoiding it. You just have to deal with it. I often like going out landscaping when it is a bit stormy. You get really good clouds. You know the subject's going to be changing really quickly, so you just set yourself up, make sure you're prepared, and that's pretty much what we're doing here. Making sure the easel is firm, not going to blow over. When you're working from life with a portrait, it is quite tricky to get a portrait big enough. Because I'm working with a mirror, the image is always going to be smaller than what it is in real life. And to make myself bigger, I actually need to bring the mirror closer to me, but my arm will stretch and touch the mirror if I go any closer. So I'm actually positioned at the maximum closeness that I can get to the mirror with my arm straight and still be able to move across the canvas without knocking the mirror. Again, as I said, it's an obstacle, but it's necessary obstacle. So this measurement is only how far from the plumb line across something is. I still have to do the coordinate down on the vertical. Gosh, my eyesight is something I'm having to deal with, but I really would like to have held off having to deal with it a bit longer. It's not a problem on the painting, it's only a problem in the mirror. That represents the bottom of my ear and the widest point of my jaw. I can predict the angle if I line it up. I can do it like that, and I can move across to my easel, my mirror, sorry. There is the height for the change in the jawline. It goes down to that point before it then changes angle. To double check, it looks like it's lining up with my neck. If I move my hair slightly, I can see it easier. Might be a bit higher than that. That's the height where the shadow comes in across my neck. So we have this kind of thing going on. actually find it's the chase that I enjoy the most, more than the finished product. So that was pretty correct for the bottom of my ear. Yeah, if you don't enjoy the chase, then it's a bit sad why you would stick at it. But I do enjoy the chase. It really is just a set of observations. Short side. It's a pity about the glare, but just got to work around it. Still need to adjust. That's there. It's actually quicker to pick up a long handled brush to measure the bigger movements than rely on the calipers. Measuring the little dip of my chin below the bottom lip. It's quite a nice thing to find in a painting. Today the light's not showing it up a lot, but I like to put it in. Bottom lip is always in light. There's not a lot of difference between the skin tone and the bottom lip area. You can sometimes guess measurements, approximations of shadows or something if the area is really small, but when it's a bigger measurement, if you're trying to measure a big measurement like that, there's no way I can guess it. But if I'm measuring just a small snippet, my eyes can visually put that down fairly well, fairly quickly. Just looking at my jawline on my left, measuring from the plumb line to where my neck crosses my cheek or jawbone. I think I must have measured that before because it seems to be correct, but again I have to position my plumb line back in again because I need to revisit the measurements constantly. I think what I'll do is I'm going to put a sample of my lightest light skin colour on. It's usually a little bit of encouragement to keep going. I'm happy with it so far. The idea is to not make changes to the drawing after this stage. So I will put a a colour on for the skin tone lights, but I'll talk to you in a minute shortly about what I'm using to make that colour. Like I said, it was a really quick mix I just did on the side. I'm just going to put that as a sample of mixture there. There. It's just as a little bit of a bit of encouragement, a bit of a tease to what I've got coming up next. The jawline around here is quite interesting. There's a very specific shape there that has to be navigated, and I'll probably have a fresh look at that after I've done something else when my brain is a bit more clued in. At the moment, I'm just, I feel like I need to take a break. It's hard to keep the brain concentrating at 100% for the entire portrait. You do have to take time out and switch off so you can come back again, which I feel like I'm almost at that point now where I need to take a brief break again. And tissue again for the press. Just lighten up some of this. Okay, I think we'll take a break again for a few minutes. Just switch my palette over. So I've moved my palette that had my two background stain colours on, and I've put up another palette now which has got my titanium white, my yellow ochre, cad red and ivory black. So on the palette here I've just mixed up a sample, only a sample of my white, my palest skin tone, which I'll do a bit more of. The red is always quite dominant, so the idea is not to use that too aggressively. I also like to make more than I think I'm going to need. I'll put a drop of medium in it. I can put a sample of this on, see how it compares. It's perhaps a tad darker than my earlier sample, but I like it. I'm going to end up painting in a light side and a dark side. So I've got my light side mixed up. I'll just stain the canvas with a fresh brush. Very important to use a separate brush for each of these mixtures. Tad more oil to make sure that it leaves the brush pretty well. So I'm going to fill this in on all of the light side. I'll have to take out that red dot, but then I want to put it back in again. Let's see. There is an alternative. I can guide a straight line through where that red dot is to put back. I'll just get a ruler. Any straight edge will do. So I'm just going to mark where that dot is. If I go up on the straight, it's a very soft ruler, isn't it? And if I have that up there, and I'll put another one over here, go further than where I know I'm going to be rubbing out from, because that helps guide me back to that intersection. So I can take that off. Don't want it to dominate too much. So now this will be my light version of skin tone. So I'll have a light and I'm going to have a dark. The dark skin tone is hopefully not far off what I've got as my rub out. I'm just filling this all in, staying within my measurements. Might as well put a slash on down there. This is interesting here. Glasses off. I started to develop a bit of a jowl here that I've noticed between my last self-portrait and this one. It does look like that skin tone needs to drop here a little. Okay, so that's just the stain for the lights. So I have a light stain, and now I'll mix a dark skin tone. I'll get rid of that brush that did my background so it's not on the palette. So things that are not needed have to be cleared away. There's no point keeping all this clutter if you're not going to need it. I'll just sneak that up there. Right, dark skin tone. Not straying from the Zorn palette. I'm actually going to go with a round soft brush for this. The reason for the round brush is I can spread the paint with softer edges. I think that one's not too bad. Probably needs to be a bit softer. I'll just find another one. Right, so I have chisel brushes and I have rounds. I also have the synthetics as well, and they each serve a different purpose. You've noticed my big flat chisel. It's probably a bit expensive to be doing the rubbing with, but I love how it feels, and I'd rather buy more brushes than use half-baked equipment that I'm not really enjoying. So yeah, I prefer probably the Neef chisels. These ones, they're synthetic. The larger sizes definitely give you the most value. The smaller sizes, I think you can replicate in other brand brushes, but these Neef ones, dare I say, they probably are my favourite. But a mix of rounds and softs. As I said, if you've got soft round brushes, then you avoid the sharp edges. So I'm just going to mix the dark skin tone. Black and red will always dominate. I'm mixing in my shadow here, which isn't ideal. So I'm just making a very generalised dark skin tone. It's not hard to mix skin tones when you're using such a simplified Zorn palette. Now I scrape off the palette knife, not wasting any paint. It's too expensive. I'm not putting any medium with this shadow tone. Just going to test. I'll take a press with a tissue, actually, just in case, pardon me, in case I've got too many of those holes filled. I don't really want to lighten, but I've got my tonal map all set. So I'm just going to thin this off so that it's ready to be replaced. I might as well catch that red dot there too. I'll do the same for that red dot that I did for that other one. I'm just lining up where that dot is going to go. Out there. Where is it? There she is. Just make that one a bit more obvious. This one. Okay, might look a bit silly, but I need to be able to get it back again. So right now, that's my skin tone. It looks too dark, but before I change it, let's see if I can utilise that darkness somewhere else. So pretty much there. Definitely the shadow under the nose. That can go there. Now, in looking for the tones and the colours, I can now see some of the drawing errors I may have made or where I need to open things up a bit. That red dot is still there, visible. I know dropping down there, it's an interesting light I've got here. Again, those two dots, they really are crucial. I'm going to need to find the corner of my mouth. Okay, so this skin tone, I'm thinking it's possibly relevant down there. Maybe it's still a bit dark. Possibly for the eyebrow. Again, there's that glare off the paint I don't like. I think I'll lighten it. Yep, I'm going to lighten it a bit. So more yellow ochre, bit of cad red. I'll utilise that black and making up more anyway. Now I'm not going to take the other tone off, I'm just going to put this one next to it and see if it's lighter. Not enough, so I'll sneak a bit white into this mixture now. Before I was actually utilising the yellow ochre to do the work of lightening the paint. Now I've put white in, that's made it lighten quicker, but it's also taken some colour out. Take a press off that. So get rid of the bad paint, the paint that was not correct. There's no point putting on freshly mixed paint on over the top of the old wrong colour. The same with this brush. I'll pull that paint out, make sure that I take the new mixture carefully. Now I can put that sample on. That's my shadow tone. It's not bad. It's certainly, before I adjust it, I probably would want to put it on over there. Again, not being lazy about being on the spot. It's possibly still a bit dark in spots, but I will use it for this, the map over this. Take that bit out of there. It's too dark, and that's the old sample anyway. Got to come out. Not sure if you're seeing the glare off the paint. I certainly am. So we'll use, I'll put all of that in. So I've got only dark and light on the painting. Again, that glare is quite annoying. That ear, I'm only making a suggestion of it. I'm quite happy with that tone on the face there. I do feel like it needs to be lighter up here. I can see it's going to go on there. So it's a match for there. Bit of a sharp edge I don't like. I'll put a third tone over that though. So there's my dark and my light. I think I can fill that in. It's not as light this side as it is that side, but now that I've done all of that, the brush is a little bit more contaminated and I'm not actually putting too much light on. This tone up here, it's kind of its own unique tone. That's a weaker version of our lightest light in there, but now I feel like I need to have that mid-tone mixed up, so I'll do that now. Now I compare on the palette, my lightest light actually isn't even mixed up, it's actually going to be white. So I'm going to take a bit of a white blob on my finger and I'm just going to place this up here as an indicator of my lightest light. By doing that, I'm actually now becoming more aware of whether that tone is going to be correct and what my darks are doing. This dark here is possibly too dark. So I'm going to lighten that off because I think it's a bit aggressive. So let's take that out. And I'll take a bit of the heaviness out of that as well. I'm just grabbing my background brush, just wanting to kind of show a bit of something going on there. My hair is much longer than this at the moment. We won't worry about that. Okay, I'm going for my mid-tone. The mid-tone up here has to be lighter than that, but not as light as that. It's almost as if I need to go to a fourth tone, but I'll do the third tone, which will be the transition tone, and it'll also be in there. Right. Palette knife, as I said, is always good to mix with because it keeps the colours clean and gives you more control. When it comes down to the very small, finer details, I won't use a palette knife at that point. I tend to then end up mixing with the brush. This is a cool colour. I'll put it on just so I can see where I'm at with it. So many brushes, but always looking for something else. I'm going for a round here. On my palette, the colour actually looks quite different. When you put a sample up, it changes depending on the angle to the light. Now, the same goes with the canvas. I actually should be testing my colours on the vertical. It's going to be hard to lift this palette up. I'll do it shortly when I've got a bit more to see. The paint bounces off the surface of that palette knife quite differently than it will off there. So the ultimate test is to put the sample onto the painting. If I don't put it onto the painting, I'm not really getting a true sample. Also, whether I put the paint on thin or thick has a difference, makes a difference as well. So this is just a cool shadow. It's possibly needing to be warmed up a fraction. So I'm going to sneak a bit of red in with my brush this time and a bit more yellow. So I'm not having it quite so neutral. That's better. Now surrounding where that red dot was, which I'll follow those lines, I can see where it was. No, it's pretty yucky, isn't it? Where else could I use it? It's pretty colourless here, but I'll take a press because I want to change that tone and make it slightly lighter. So take off the old paint. Oh, the glare. Okay, now that eye socket is entirely in shadow, but it's lighter again under here. We'll still have to take a press. I'm going to put this worst thing about self-portraits is when you have the glare in your eye. If you want to paint yourself with your eyes open, you kind of got to suck it up a bit. Okay, so now I think this, spreading the sample out, it's a bit dull in colour. Could possibly go even a bit lighter. Still working for here where we don't want a lot of colour. It's now lighter next to a darker bit. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to move the camera. Take that out a bit wider. Definitely have a space here. Depending on where the light is, can be either a flattering or a not so flattering angle. But shadow under the nose, a lot of people don't like. I like it. Alright, I'm going to try this cool, lighter colour for that middle piece. Again, that shadow is difficult. There's not much colour in that shadow side, but I think probably I've still got too little colour. So I'm just going to adjust this with the brush, keeping it quite light. Again, taking off what's not right. If I want to change something, don't go putting it on over the top of a colour that's wrong. So this is my new colour. You can see that's quite a bit warmer. So I'm happier with that as a shadow tone. Again, prepare the surface by taking that press. So this is my shadow tone, watching out for those measurements. Flattening out the brush where I don't want sharp edges. Even that's a bit dull and yucky, so I'm going to change that. You'll notice the plumb line going, and hopefully I don't have to chase it back too much. There I was criticising people who leave the mouth to last, and here I've done it again. Going over with a slightly lighter tone. Now, the ear is always interesting. It's almost an in-between tone again. There's a highlight down the bottom. There's a streak of light up there, and the rest is kind of a mid-tone. So I'm going to go now from I've got a dark, a mid to dark, and a light, not my lightest light. I'm going to mix another tone here in between. So I try not to steal from the other piles, because you lessen the amount you have left over. And although you think, oh, I'll just take a bit of that and that'll lighten it, well, then I'm not going to have enough of that other one for down the track. And it's been a bit of a learning curve for students to realise that you have to have enough paint mixed up to start with. And if you get to steal from another nearby pile, that's fine, but it's not ideal. This is my warmest colour, which I really like. I'm going to put that on. Again, the tissues being really close by, at arm's reach, really, really important. Now another brush. There you go. Take it off the palette knife. Again, I don't want to waste it. I've just spent that time mixing it. And paint's not cheap. Okay. Breaking away from Zorn, I would introduce alizarin crimson here. I'm going to try not to. I'm going to try and create a darker, warmer red. something that's going to show up a bit more. So I've got my darkest, my lightest, my neutral, and now I'm attempting to go for my warmest area that's in colour. It's probably too much colour. We can back it off a bit. I'll neutralise it a bit by putting in some yellow. And then if I'm going to put in the yellow and the white, I'm changing the tone slightly. If you mix a new colour, just make sure the tone is matching what you had before. If it doesn't, then before you change it, just see if you can use it somewhere. So I'm noticing a bit of warmth down there. We can have a bit more warmth there. That's possibly too long. Now it's weakened because I've picked up a bit of paint from other areas, so you can see that it's not as strong now as what it would have been before. I'm going to neutralise that again, so I'll add black, but that darkens it, and then I have to add the white to bring it back to the same tone, just being mindful that I'm matching the tone. Again, you can see me mixing with a brush. Like I said, I don't mind mixing smaller piles with the brush. These are neutral colours I'm putting on now because I don't want the shadow side to have the most heat on it. Not a bad colour. Feel like I need an in-between tone there. Remembering each time I touch the brush in another area, I'm contaminating or picking up another colour. So that then weakens the colour for the next part I'm going to touch. I might just open that eye up a bit more. Again, really hard to measure an eye that you're shutting. So this is where it's really good to have had those plumb lines still marked. That's got to be a bit higher. So this and this are still, they're very, very relevant. I may still need to scribe those lines back in again. But at this point, I'm looking for big gaps. A lot of looking, not a lot of putting at this stage. And that's too strong. I'll need to go back down another tone. So over here, again, take a press if it's not right. You don't want it to be half right for mixing. Still probably not dark enough. I'm going to go back to my dark. Now, making sure that that is dark enough. There. And that dark definitely kicks in here. A little bit hard to see with that glare. Again, it's the position of lights, as I said, it's all very, the most crucial thing. I'll have to go downwards, which is not something I tend to like to do. But as I said, every studio you paint in is going to set you up with different problems. Going out landscaping, you still have those issues where you're trying to navigate the light, the sun, the shadows that keep moving. I'm a bit of a moving target, but nothing like out in a landscape. Black and cad red, really nice dark skin tone. You can have it as neutral as you like, or you can have it with a bit more of your red. It's interesting, I've got these glasses on my head, but I don't use them for painting. It's really still clinging to that bit of denial. Laying the brushes in the paint pile definitely helps to avoid confusion. I'd like to say it speeds me up. Quite the neutral down there. It's still in shadow. I think at this point I'm going to put a bit more light in. So I'm going to break to another light tone. The difference here that I want to point out is when you're working from life, you see much more subtle variation in the tones. Not even to touch on colour, it's very much a case of getting those mid-tones working. I find a lot of people who work from photos, they get the darks dark enough, they get the lights light enough, but they don't manage that in-between range. And that is, to me, is quite crucial. It's the area that sorts out, you can see if someone's worked from a photo or not. So you notice this colour I'm putting on right now, it's a cool light. Just taking a bit of a press. I always say it's fine to use your fingers. Use whatever works. If the palette knife works, use the palette knife. Actually, it's not a problem to, not a problem to change and use other tools. Okay, just stepping back a bit and also walking away on a different angle can help. I'm just walking to the back of the studio, just seeing if I can recognise myself. I think I can. Yeah, so this part of the painting now, I've got to slow down to be more accurate. I feel like it's starting to evolve. I need to go back and put another brush on that earlier mid to light. Now it has its own place of use, so I can do that. Yeah. Plumb line. Just looking always for that plumb line. Do need to go back and reassess that mouth now. It's quite a bit higher. It's actually there. Right, that earlier dark skin tone is going to come back in again under the nose. I'm going to recreate that. And there's that flare again. It's quite a dark shadow. And then the next tone down from that shadow is now the shadow side of that nose. There's a slightly lighter reflected undertone light in here. This tone could be the start of that cheek area. Might be too warm. Good quality brush can do small marks and big marks. I often try and tell my students that if they've got the money, they should be buying better quality brushes and have fewer of them if necessary, but never compromise the quality of your brush. Now it's contaminated, it becomes the next tone down. You can hit that there. Here's where the greys come in. So this is actually a skin tone I'm putting in the hair, but it's very valid. When in doubt, fuzz out. Some nice reds just taking their position here. I'm going to stick some white into that because I want it to be lighter, but I still want it to be relevant in terms of the colour. So I've only changed the tone, made it a bit lighter. Not much mixed up, so I'll have to go again. This time I'll try and do it with a brush. I don't want to leave myself with too little on the brush later. A bit of warmth over here. Sneak a bit of that yellow ochre back in. Behind me I have a dark background. Don't really want to explain too much of that dark background, but it is relevant to showing the highlights on the hair. Again, I don't want it to look like I've got stripes in my hair, but the tone is quite substantially changed. I am enjoying this particular one today, which is nice. Sometimes they roll off the brush and other times it's harder to pull it back. Setting up, as I said, is so crucial. If you get that wrong, you're behind the 8 ball before you start. Right, where are we going? Let's look at those eyes again. The nostril, I'll just go back to a dark tone for that nostril. Black and cad red again. A nice dark, it's quite warm. And what's the angle of it? It's too dark, but let's see if I can use it somewhere else. Yes, I can use it over here. Not too dark. When in doubt, take it out or rub it out. Let's see, what can I use this for? Okay. Right, you'll notice the palette is still very ordered. Each brush sits where it's meant to be in the pile of paint that it responds to. Got quite a big shift in these two tones here. I feel like I'm going to need to mix another one. And before I do that, I'm going to shift this one over all of that high. So there. Here's where the discipline comes in, taking off anything that's going to contaminate. Remember, if you're only using such a few amount of colours, you can't go too far wrong with your colour mixing. Oh, that's getting to be a nice pile then. You should have harmony through all of your colours if you've only used, say, 2 colours plus black and white, because that's what these skin tones are, 2 colours plus black and white. If I want to make it a hot, warmer red, I can make it with less black in it. If I want a cool red, I would end up putting a bit more black. Right, again, scraping it off the palette knife, making sure I don't waste any. Colours have to work harmoniously, as I said, because there certainly isn't any foreign colours put out on the palette. Now that tone is actually too dark for there. Just going to pull this paint out of here before I go back into that one. Take a press. just to be on the safe side. So you can see that by doing that press, I'm preparing the surface to take this paint. The more times I touch the canvas with the brush, the more contaminated the paint becomes. Now I'm going to go back up to there. That's my hairline. We'll just soften that so it's not important. I like this cooler colour in there. This looks like I should have measured it. Actually, it's not too bad. Difficult to see in the shade there. And this is the shadow version. Let's try the light version on the other side. I'm actually not going to use that brush, it's contaminated and I can't get my mixture clean enough. So I'm going to take that off from there, put it in a spare spot, wipe the palette knife, and I'm going to pull as much of that paint out as I can. I don't really want to wash the brush with terps because what will happen, the moisture inside the brush, it actually makes the paint behave differently than when you put that paint on without that extra dissolvent action in. And here again, I have to wipe that spot where I'm mixing my fresh colour. Okay. Now, when I take the paint, I have to make sure I take it from the clean part of the white, not the dirty side. Clean part of my yellow ochre and a clean speck of red. That palette knife was wiped before I started, so there's no allowing that colour to become grey again. I think it needs a bit more red in it. I think we can hear tummies grumbling. Might be time for something to eat. Okay. So that brush has been prepared for this colour, not rinsing it, like I said. This is my lightest one, and as you can guess, I still have to take a press off those tones that I'm going to be changing because I'm correcting the mixture. There we go. It's amazing how you can find things that don't cost you any money. You've probably already got them in the house that you can use to help assist you with changing the behaviour of the paint you're using. Don't really want a sharp edge there. Sharp edges bring the eye to that spot. So my saying, as you've heard, when in doubt, fuzz it out, blur it out. If you can't see it, don't keep looking for it. It's probably not there anyway. So that brown that was my darker tone is now becoming an in-between tone. I'm just softening that edge. The hair almost becomes the skin and the skin becomes the hair up here. There's no need to really define it. This bit here is important. That's too dark there. And steal a bit of that paint that I put to the side. Let's put that in So the tone of that's quite interesting. It's kind of reflecting a lot of light through it. You'd say it's colourless, but then again, in the light, this type of light, we're picking up on strays that are looking white. This is too dark, needs more resolve. It's probably dark enough. It could even go lighter, but it's still quite a neutral colour. Same here. Ugh. That's there, but not in that spot. It's in the painting. So up there, very neutral there. In fact, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm always fascinated with the features in that we need to have a look at the angles of things. Some people have a length here and then a short bit here. Others might have this very round. It could almost be straight. If this was long here, then that's short, but it could also be that this is the short bit before the long bit. Just something that I've always been quite interested in chasing and acknowledging with my portraits. So I'm going to do a bit of slash and dash here, leaving some brush stroke behind. This section is in shadow, but not particularly dark. That's possibly too light, but it is a little hard to tell with the flare. If I step back, it's definitely easier to see when I step back. This here is too dark. I want a mid-tone, so I'm going to let that touch in. A little bit of room now for abbreviations of those other tones that we had originally. An abbreviation might just be a slight adjustment. Bad colour that. I'm going to steal a bit more red into that. Put it up there. Just tricky light. It's probably too dark there. There's my stomach grumbling. It's time for a break. I'm going to stop now and take a bit more of a break, and we'll be back soon. It's a bit dark that time. Glitter is a problem. This is an in-between tone. The contamination factor is now moving across from colour to colour. A little in between tone there again. I really hope this demonstration shows the discipline that's involved, because quite often it's this, people think it's all about learning the right colour, the right drawing, but it's actually tone. Tone is the king. Tone is the one that if you get wrong, a black and white photograph of your work will not be accurate. You won't tell. But if you've got a good painting with good drawing, good tone, it doesn't really matter what you do with the colour. The colours can change, but in a black and white photograph, they better still work. And if they don't, then it's usually a case that the tone is wrong. Really important to note that. Right, I'm going to change the background because it's really hard to see my hair amongst that. It's darker on this side, so it shows the lights here, but the background is lighter here against the darks of the hair. Pretty important to get right. Before I go any further though, I do just want to get something. Mouth. Always leave the mouth till last. Okay, I'm just going to quickly put something in for the mouth. Small areas, as I said, you can mix with a brush if you're just doing small areas. This part of my mouth actually is just becoming skin tone. It's too dark, where the press can help. I've come up too high, I know that. I'm just going to manoeuvre that down. Take a press first. And I'm going to cut back in. And then we're going to go straight into that background colour. I want to carve that. It's too high. I must have lost that measurement. Okay. You've always got to remain humble. Always accept that you could be wrong. Cotton buds can be handy too for removing something if you put something where you didn't want it. I have a very thin lips compared to others. Makes me wonder what I'll be left with when I'm older, whether I'll have any lips. Right, we're not going to go on too much longer. It is meant to be a study. But, I can try and complete it as much as possible. Really is tricky, that light, the glare off the paint. Just want to blur that line a bit. Alright, time to change the background colour. Yep, let's do the background. What I'd like to do here, I'm going to take this palette off and I'm going to bring back just a small palette with another colour on it. Right. I'm just going to be using this palette purely to make up a background colour. Now I am going to get out some alizarin crimson. So Okay, so alizarin, and I'm going to take the black off my other palette, bring that up, and some white. Now the white, that little bit of contamination on the palette is going to help me. If I just use straight black and alizarin on their own, the colour's going to be very acidy. That's dominant by black, of course. Put a bit of medium in there. Don't know if you can pick that up. That's just without the white in it. I'm going to put the white in it deliberately so that I can smoke it off. Black and white, we know, makes grey. So if the colour's too strong, just pull back on the red and make it more grey with just your black and white. Now, I'm not going to change that too much. I'm going to get another brush. This is my dark colour for the light side of my face. Now, I'm just going to take those blobs off. You can see how the red without the white in it is too strong. This will be too strong too. Yep, I want to grey that off a bit. I'm going to do this with the brush now. I want it to be through the paint. I think I need a bit of yellow in there to stop it being so bright. Again, black and white kill colour. That's more like what I'm after. Taking that off, that's more like it. Still a bit more yellow. So this is the dark side of my face. Sorry, the light side of my face, the dark behind me. Gosh, you know how I talk about having control, the palette's not behaving correctly. I'll just take a break while I grab some more black. Right. Okay, if I put it on thinner, it'll be, with the terps, it behaves differently. I actually like that. I just want to keep that quite terpsy, taking a bit of that heat out of that background. A bit of variety in the palette is not too bad. I'm just going to put that, that's probably light enough. It's still too colourful for me. I think I would prefer more neutral. The opposite of purple is yellow. And that's why putting that little bit of yellow ochre back into the mix takes away that purple. Still a bit purple, not too bad. What I love on this one is the way the background becomes the hair. Tonally, they're still the same. There's not a lot of change of colour. I'm just going to put terps on there, not even put paint on. I'm just putting more terps on. Dragging that. Let some of that hair become the background and some of the background becomes the hair. and just let them mix in a bit. Now over this side I'm going darker. Still too much colour in there for my liking. Ugh. Opposite of purple, yellow. I often say you can kill colour by putting black and white in it. The other option is to put the opposite colour in. So if you're looking at a colour wheel, yellow and black almost makes green. Sorry, yellow and purple, blue and orange, and we have red and green. Red and green's a pretty easy one to remember, and I often used to say to kids, think about the traffic lights. Traffic lights will tell you the opposite of red is green. Okay, let's go back to that dark in the hair. Just going to re-establish some of those nice rich darks that we had in the hair. They're actually quite colourless too. And there was soften edges. Okay, the hair is darker than the background here. So without describing it too much, I think that's going to be close. Can easily go back to my skin tone palette here because I need the red, of course. I haven't thrown any strays in, but in the terms of the hair, like a few lights. I think we're pretty much done. Didn't get to that lip. The bottom lip I did want to have a crack at. I'm stealing from different piles now. Oh, too much. This is where I'm pretty sure I need my glasses on. No. The problem now is I put the glasses on. They work for close-up but not for distance. But I need to put them on to approach. Oh, too strong. That's better. All right. Background, did we finish that? That is our greyer side. It's always nice to leave something really rough and terpsy. I'm just going to throw something in on for the shirt. Again, it can be a bit muddy. Let's go for it. Not making anything stand out too much. carefully. Okay, so I'm stealing a bit now from other colours, just those last few wispy light bits. A bit more. All right. Okay, I think we'll call it done.